Okay, in the second session of our tutorials, we're going to kind of explore some of the basic tools over here on the left-hand side just to get you familiar with things prior to that first class. So initially what we're going to do is come down here and go to create a new layer, and Photoshop displays new layers with a checkerboard. That shows that it's transparent. It's not going to be a checkerboard, but it's going to be see-through. So basically putting a piece of plastic over top of a white sheet of paper. All right, we could also, remember, go to layer and new layer, or we could hit Shift Control N. So it's going to really be helpful if you do learn some shortcut keys. It's going to speed your workflow up quite a bit. We're going to first off go down here on the left-hand side to this rectangular marquee tool. And there's a lot of hidden tools in Photoshop. If I click and hold, you can see that there's some other hidden tools that I could do, an elliptical marquee or single row. We're probably not going to use single row or single column at all, but we will use the rectangular and elliptical marquee. So I'm going to use the rectangle marquee tool, and I'm going to click in my workspace and drag while holding down the left mouse button. And I can create a rectangle or a square or any kind of configuration thereof. While I'm still holding down, if I hold the Shift key, I can make a perfect square. This is going to be true with an elliptical tool as well. If I want an ellipse, I can let loose of the Shift key, and if I want a perfect circle, I'm going to hold the Shift key down. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down and then oops, I let loose of the Shift key too soon. Let loose of the mouse first and then the Shift key, and now I have a perfect square. So that's going to lead us to the idea that this is just selecting this area, and it's basically protecting all of this area out around here. So this is the area that I want to work on in this particular picture. I can then come down into my color picker, and I can just left click on it, and this menu pops up. And I can change the value, which means a value change is taking a pure color and then adding either white or black to it. So I have all these different configurations. If I want to change the hue, then I use this hue slider, and I'm changing that original color up here to some other color, and then I can modify the value. So there's two words there, value and hue. So I'm going to change this to this color, and you can see what the new color is and what it was prior to that. And I'm going to hit OK, and nothing happens. Well, I have to fill it in. So I can do that in a couple of different ways. I can come over here, and this is true in Photoshop Elements as well as just plain Photoshop. There's another, like the marquee tool, there are hidden tools underneath there. One is a gradient tool, one is a paint bucket tool. And I'm going to choose the paint bucket tool, and I can left click then, and it fills it in. I don't even have to click in the box because I've made this selection, and it's only going to let it fill inside there. So let me just show you that. Here's another key that you really need to be aware of is Control Z with your left hand is an undo procedure. So I hit Control Z. I usually use my ring finger with Control and my index finger with Z, and that's my left hand, so that I don't have to take my right hand off the mouse. So now this time I'm just going to click clear out here. And I guess the paint bucket doesn't work that way. Sorry, I have to click in there. So then to get rid of the marching ants or that selection, I'm going to hit Control D as in Delta, which is deselect. Now I have that on one layer. I can then go up to this other tool, which is the Move tool, select it, and now I can move this object all around this layer and even off of that layer. Now, I want to be really disciplined here, and I want to select a new layer, make a new layer, and make another shape. So this time I'm going to use an elliptical marquee tool, and I'll make an ellipse. Click here, and I'll change the color. And I could take the paint bucket again and click and fill. I'd like you to remember this, and I'm going to try to drive this into your head. It's Alt and then the backspace key is the fill. Alt backspace fills with the foreground color, and Control backspace fills with the background color. So that is a really big time saver instead of having to come over here and click all the time. Then I have the rectangle or the marching ants. Control D is deselect. I could come up here to select and deselect as well, and there's the shortcut key so you can tell what that is. Now, I can select that layer, go up to the Move tool, and I can move it around. But I can't seem to get it underneath the green square. So in order to get it underneath the green square, I have to change my stacking order over here in my layers. I'm going to click and drag down underneath, and now I have the green box on top of the blue rectangle, or the blue ellipse. So now I can't get it on top. So this stacking order is really, really important. Okay, I want you to look at that. I want you to make some shapes, but I want you to make sure that you're always putting them on a different layer. That way you have the flexibility to move them around depending on which layer is selected. Okay. Now, there is a couple of other ways to make some more detailed shapes, and that would be to make a new layer again. I'm going to drag that up above. And if you notice, every time that we choose a tool over here, there are new tools that show up over here. And right now it probably is going to be defaulted to this. So that means that every time I make a shape and then I click again, that shape goes away. But if I use this as a union, and now when I click again, this shape is going to remain and it's going to add to that selection. So I could make it like a thought bubble or something like that. I also can go to the subtract button and I can subtract a shape. And this one is the intersection of both. It's going to keep the intersection of both selections, and I rarely use that, but I do use this. So I'm going to hit Alt Backspace again. I better change the color first real fast. Alt Backspace, fills, Control D, deselects. And so now I have a much more complex shape. I'm going to turn these off, and if you notice right here there's some visibility eyeballs, and we can turn those off. And I'm going to make another one here. And I could start off with a circle, and then I'm going to switch to a rectangle, and I'm going to make, say, add to that selection. And then I might subtract part of a rectangle, and I might come back to a circle and add to that. So I can make some kind of complex shapes. Now, I want you to, the last thing here I want to show you is when I fill this, which is Alt Backspace again, Control D is deselect. Look, I have a really nice sharp line here. But there are some other tools up here with just feather, and so I want to show you what that does real fast, and we'll stop with this section here. I'm going to make just a circle, but before I do the circle, I'll hit Control D. I want to change this feather right now. I want to change it to about 15 pixels. And now draw a circle, and it looks like it's the same configuration, but now when I fill it and Control D, you can see that it's a fuzzy line. So it is blurred 15 pixels in depth here around the edge. So you might be able to make some kind of interesting shapes there based on this feather up here. So we won't get into the style and the anti-alias right now, but the feather, I would like you to kind of practice that if you have Photoshop up and running already. So I think if you're kind of fluent with those tools right there, we will be pretty well set for that first class. So become familiar with the Move tool and the Marquee tool and the Paint Picker. And then remember, the fill is Alt Backspace, or you could use the fill button, but I'd rather you use the backspace.